Some men don't fall in love. They fall into escape. They chase women not because they're in control, but because they've lost control. Not because they're full, but because they're empty. And every kiss, every validation, every moment of attention is just another breath in a life they don't know how to breathe alone. Diogenes saw this over 2,000 years ago. While the world was obsessed with structure, status, and romantic ideals, he stripped everything down. He didn't hate women. He didn't hate men. He hated illusion. And the biggest illusion? That a broken man will be fixed by being loved. No one says it out loud, but it's everywhere. In movies, in culture, in the quiet desperation of a man who has everything, except himself. So he runs, not physically, emotionally, from stillness, from pain, from silence, and into the arms of someone else. But here's the truth. If you don't know who you are, you'll make someone else your identity. And when they leave, you'll feel like you died. Not because they were everything, but because you were nothing before they came. This is the kind of man Diogenes mocked, not out of cruelty, but clarity. The man who worships the external because he's terrified of the internal, who builds his sense of worth on being wanted, who mistakes attention for affection and sex for connection, who calls it passion when it's just panic dressed in desire. And the worst part? The world celebrates him, calls him confident, charismatic, a ladies' man. But underneath the jokes, the smiles, the numbers, is a boy. A boy who never learned how to sit with his own discomfort. So he turned women into medicine, into mirrors, into meaning. But women aren't medicine. They're people. And when you use people to numb your emptiness, you don't love them. You consume them. This obsession doesn't begin with lust. It begins with loss. A loss that happens long before the first kiss, the first heartbreak, the first rejection. It begins when a boy looks for a mirror and finds none. No father to reflect him. No guidance that says, "This is who you are." So he turns to the world, to teachers, to screens, to culture, and eventually, to women. Diogenes saw this dependency for what it was: a man outsourcing his identity. He mocked those who dressed in pride but lived in dependence. He saw through the charm, the seduction, the false confidence. And he knew, a man who chases women for validation isn't powerful. He's starving. The modern world teaches boys how to flirt, but not how to focus, how to attract, but not how to anchor. They learn how to touch, but not how to stand still. And so they grow into men with shallow depth and loud hunger, always chasing, always needing, never resting. Because when your sense of self is tied to being wanted, you never stop wanting. You can have her body, her time, her affection, but still feel empty. Because it was never about her. It was about filling the space that should have been filled by you. And here's the painful part. Many of these men are good men, kind, talented, intelligent, but they're lost. Because they're chasing women the same way a drowning man chases air. Not with love, but with fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being unseen. Fear of sitting in silence and hearing nothing but their own doubts echoing back. So they fill the silence with noise, with pleasure, with pursuit, with fantasies where they're always loved. Because in real life, they're not even sure if they like themselves. There's a point where the pursuit stops being about attraction and becomes addiction, where it's no longer about the woman, but what she represents. safety, power, worth. She becomes a symbol, not a person. A fantasy to project onto, a stage to perform on, a mirror to reflect what he wishes he was. But mirrors don't love you back. They show you what you want to see, until they don't. And when the reflection fades, when she doesn't respond the way he needs, he collapses. Not because she left, but because she took his identity with her. Diogenes saw through all of this. He didn't hate women. He didn't hate men. He hated dependency, emotional slavery disguised as romance. He lived in a barrel, mocked kings, rejected fame, because he understood. You're never free if your peace depends on anyone else's presence. And that's the trap modern men keep walking into. They don't build themselves. They decorate themselves with charm, wealth, muscle, wit. And they hope someone will come along and make it all feel real. But validation is rented. It's temporary. And every man who lives off it becomes desperate to keep it. So he clings. He sacrifices values for attention. He accepts disrespect for proximity. He calls obsession love and control loyalty. And slowly, he stops being a man. He becomes a reflection of who she wants, or worse, who he thinks she wants. Until there's nothing left of him. Just the shell, the smile, the need. The real tragedy isn't that men chase women. It's that they forget who they are in the process. They pour themselves into someone else, hoping that if they give enough, if they love hard enough, if they become exactly what she wants, then maybe, finally, they'll be worthy. Worthy of staying, of mattering, of being seen. But love built on emptiness is just dependency in disguise. And the more you need her to make you whole, the more fragmented you become. Diogenes rejected this kind of longing. He didn't chase connection. He chased clarity. He didn't beg for love. He demanded self-respect. Because he knew, the moment you need someone else to validate you, you've handed over your freedom. And freedom is the only thing worth fighting for. A man who knows himself, truly, doesn't need to impress. He doesn't need to chase. He doesn't need to be liked. He walks into a room with the calm of someone who has nothing to prove, because he's already faced the thing most men run from, his own reflection. That's what they don't tell you. You don't become attractive by chasing women. You become attractive by stopping the chase entirely and turning inward, building, healing, strengthening, not for them, but for you. Because the man who is full in himself radiates something different, something untouchable. He doesn't need to dominate. He doesn't need to beg. He chooses. He invites. He walks away when something costs too much peace, and the world notices, including her. If you've ever felt like you were losing yourself to gain someone else, if this story feels too familiar to ignore, then you're not alone. And if you're ready to rebuild something stronger, something real, join us. Quietly, intentionally. Subscribe, and keep walking this path with us. Because this isn't about women. It's about waking up from the illusion that you weren't enough alone. A healthy relationship isn't a rescue mission. It's a collaboration between two people who know who they are and don't need to lose themselves to love each other. But here's the problem. Most men never learned that. Because they were taught to chase, to perform, to win. So they walk into relationships like actors on stage, hoping the role earns them affection. But Diogenes would have laughed at this performance. He didn't live for applause. He lived for truth, raw, unfiltered, unpolished. He believed that freedom matters more than fitting in. that wholeness matters more than being desired, and that no amount of sex, romance, or affection will fix the man who hasn't fixed his own foundation. Because when your self-worth is built on someone else's approval, you're not in a relationship. You're in captivity. You mold yourself into what they want. You walk on eggshells, afraid to speak your truth. You trade your authenticity for access. And it works, for a while. Until one day you wake up and realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. That's why real connection only happens when you're already whole. Not perfect, just grounded, aware, aligned with your own values, unapologetic about your boundaries. Only then can you stand next to someone without collapsing into them. Only then can you love without needing. Only then can you give without losing. This kind of man doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't stay where he isn't seen. He doesn't confuse chaos for passion. He knows that peace isn't boring. It's the highest standard. Because when you've lived through emotional hunger, stillness feels sacred. And the irony? The moment you stop needing someone to choose you is the moment you finally become the man worth choosing. Diogenes didn't believe in appearances. He rejected titles, wealth, status, and yes, even romantic attachments. Not because he hated people, but because he saw what they did to themselves, just to be loved. He watched men abandon their integrity to be desired. He watched them compromise their truth just to be chosen. He watched them live entire lives as someone else, just to avoid being alone. And he asked, if love costs you yourself, what exactly are you gaining? Most people can't answer that, because they've been trained to believe that being wanted is the highest currency, that loneliness is a failure, that to be alone is to be broken. So they jump from one connection to the next, not because they're ready to share their lives, but because they're terrified to sit still with their own. They don't enter relationships with clarity. They enter with wounds, with fear, with need. And those wounds shape everything. They say yes when they mean no. They stay when they should leave. They tolerate chaos, disrespect, and emptiness, because anything feels better than silence. But Diogenes wasn't afraid of silence. He lived in it. He chose it. Over comfort, over status, over false intimacy. Because he understood something most people still don't. You're not ready to connect with someone else until you can sit fully with yourself, without flinching. That means knowing your values, living by your boundaries, healing your shame instead of hiding it behind seduction. It means being so full that you no longer chase, so clear that you no longer perform, so grounded that your presence doesn't demand attention, it commands respect. And when that kind of man walks away from something that doesn't serve him, he doesn't look back. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he's no longer willing to trade freedom for familiarity. You can chase for years and never arrive. You can collect lovers, affection, memories, and still feel hollow. Because it was never about what you gained. It was about what you abandoned on the way to getting it. Yourself. Diogenes saw the world differently. While others begged for approval, he demanded honesty. He stripped away the noise until only truth remained, even if that truth was ugly, even if it meant solitude, even if it meant being misunderstood. He didn't reject intimacy. He rejected dependence. And there's a difference. Intimacy is a choice. Dependency is a prison. So here's the question. Are you seeking connection or escape? Is your desire rooted in strength or in lack? Are you loving someone or trying not to feel alone? Because until you answer that, every relationship will feel like a performance. Every goodbye will feel like death, and every moment of silence will feel like failure. But when you finally stop running, when you stop chasing, when you sit in the stillness of your own presence and make peace with the parts of yourself you used to hide, that's when it changes. You stop looking for someone to save you. You start building a life worth sharing. And when someone walks into that life, they're not filling a void. They're joining your path. But that kind of clarity is rare, because before you build it, you have to survive something darker. The most dangerous force in a person's life isn't desire. It's the behavior they repeat, without knowing why. And that's exactly what we'll face in the next video.